Hey guys, welcome back to 1776 or Bust. So today we're going to be taking a look at an interesting firearm that probably most of you could care less about, and it's this one right here, the HK P2000. It is by far probably not the most popular firearm right now. It is 2022, so I could understand why that would be. The P2000 came out in 2001, so you're talking about a firearm that has really not made any types of changes in about 21 years. So when you kind of fast forward the clock, you're wondering why would you buy this gun in the first place when you know it really doesn't do anything special. It is not any better or not even close, I should say, to like, let's say the MR920, which is just a fantastic gun. Love this gun. It is not better, and it is not necessarily any more prettier than a PX4 Storm compact carry, which is also a very awesome firearm. So then it would be, why would you get a P2000? So for me, the second firearm I ever owned, which is going on probably 15 years ago, was a P2000. It was actually a 40 cal. It was an LEM trigger, the V1, just an amazing trigger. Wasn't exactly the prettiest gun. It was bulky. It was clunky. You know, ergonomically, the gun it's okay. I mean, it feels okay in the hand. It's not anything perfect, but it's also not horrible. Now, the P2000, when it came out, it came out at a time when there really wasn't a lot of competition. You know, there wasn't a huge slew of polymer wonders like we see now, whether they're striker-fired or even hammer-fired handguns. And really, the P2000 is an evolutionary change, I guess you could say, of the USP. So when the P2000 came out, it was an intriguing thing because really, when you look at it, it does have a nice style to it. And at the same time, you had the replaceable backstrap, which was new for the market, I guess, at that point. The stippling isn't that great. I mean, really nothing about this gun is really phenomenal, but at that time, it was kind of leaps and bounds above other firearms. There was a little bit more modularity with the backstrap. Ergonomically, it wasn't horrible. It had the cocking lever in the back, some night sights on there. So really, it was a decent firearm for the time period. Now, again, fast forward 21 plus years, and you're looking at a gun that, in my opinion, has kind of grown long in the tooth. The interesting thing about HK is you have a lot of people that love them and a lot of people who will sit there and say, well, why do you need to change something that's really good anyway? And I'm not saying you have to change the gun. I'm just saying maybe modernizing it a little bit more, maybe giving it a better trigger system in it would change it. Now, the trigger, I've got to tell you guys, the trigger on this gun is terrible. This is a V3 and it is a double action, single action firearm. And when I first got it out of the box, it was ridiculously heavy as a trigger. The double action was coming in at almost 14 pounds. The single action was about 9.5 to 10 pounds. It just was not a good trigger. Now, obviously, you can change that, which I have done with a hammer spring, a trigger return spring, which is actually pretty simple. It's a lot more easy than I thought it would be to do those types of things. But nonetheless, it had to be done to make this a little bit more of a I guess you could say, higher than marginal, but less than good. And I think that's where the trigger lies right now. As a matter of fact, if I get my little trusty gauge here to kind of tell you what the double action looks like, and let me get this ready here. The double action right now currently with the trigger work and the spring work is pulling at 8 pounds, 5.6 ounces, which in my opinion is a very doable, very usable double action. The single action is coming in at approximately 4 pounds and 3.8 ounces. So again, it is a much more doable trigger, but it takes a little work to get it to there. Out of the box, it's atrocious. So we're going to go to the table. We're going to take a closer look at some of the features and then do a quick comparison of the MR920 size-wise and also the PX4 Storm. So guys, and to the table we are. So let's take a look at this gun a little bit closer where we can get a better, I guess, look and idea of why this gun to me still has something to offer people. Now, ultimately, when you look at a P2000, you're going to really have to come to terms with the fact that you're going to be paying for a premium firearm that right now in 2022 is less than premium. This, to me, is not a premium firearm. You know, when you look at some of the modern features of the MR920, this commands a premium cost because I believe this is a premium striker-fired handgun. The PX4 compact carry, same thoughts. You know, while this isn't necessarily anybody's favorite gun, with all the improvements they've done on triggers and all those other things in this particular model, this is commanding a premium price because I believe it is a premium firearm. The P2000 20 years ago, probably you could say was a premium firearm, which could command that premium price. However, I don't necessarily believe that any longer. Now, for those of you who are H&K fans and don't want to hear that, I'm sorry, guys, but to me, that is the truth of this firearm. Ultimately, it's going to be based on you. If you decide to pick this gun up, what I would do is I'd probably recommend picking this up used on the used market as opposed to brand new, because you can find these from 450 to 500, which is still fairly high. But if you want the HK name and you want the H&K profile and knowing that this is going to be a reliable firearm, then it might be the type of gun for you. Now, I spoke about the ergonomics. The ergonomics of the firearm are kind of a mixture. Now, it isn't necessarily terrible, because it's not. It's a lot more comfortable than a Glock, but at the same time, one of the things I notice is between the small and the medium is kind of the comfort zone that I have. Now, I have probably large hands, I guess. And what I would say is that if the small doesn't work, it's just too small of a radius around the grip. The medium feels like it's just a little bit too big where it pushes my hand a little too far back. So if I had to wish on something, I wish they came with a schmedium. That way you can have it in between, because to me, that would be where the Goldilocks spot is. Now, I went with the medium, and the medium is very controllable. It feels very good. You can see that you're not really going to get any type of slide cut on your hand or a slide bite, for the fact that the slide runs a little bit high, but at the same time, there's plenty of polymer in the back here in order for you to be able to manipulate the firearm without having a problem. Now, obviously, you can see back here, this is the decocker. There is no safety on this particular model. This is a V3. And that's the way I would prefer to carry it. I don't want a safety on my firearm. However, the decocking mechanism, to me, is what I think is one of the best features of this firearm. I like the location of it. There's nothing here to rub your thumb. There's nothing to get caught on a holster or a belt, if that even happens. But I do like the manipulation, because it is very easy as just dropping your thumb back there and dropping the hammer. You can see that the hammer does have a little bit of a spur on there. It is a plastic hammer, so, whatever. The night sights on here are very basic. They are not a high-vis front or anything of that sort. So it is very basic. But again, did come with 3 magazines as well. And the finish is excellent. It is a nice sheen on the finish. It seems to be, again, very typical HK quality. And other than that, aesthetically, it's a decent firearm. Would I say it's the best? Well, in 2022, no. Back in 2001, it probably was very close to that. Now, the magazines, you can see it has a little lip on the bottom, so you get a little bit more space on there. I don't really know if that's necessary, because you can see that my finger doesn't even come close to hitting it. And even without that mag, if it was a flat base plate, I think it would be a little bit better for concealability. Of course, you can put USP flat mag base plates on here, and it works with no problem. However, I haven't done that. Now, let's kind of talk about the trigger. Okay, so if you want to talk about the worst feature of this firearm, it's definitely the trigger. And it's definitely the trigger in a couple of ways. First off, the trigger shape is a very, very, very radical hook. I mean, it is just ridiculous. There's no room whatsoever to shift your finger up and down. That could be good, could be bad, depending on how you look at it. But at the same time, if you have a very fat finger, that sucker ain't fitting in there, because there's no room. And that's one of the downsides of the trigger. I think also because of that, the way that trigger hook feels, it does it really make the trigger hard to manipulate? Not really, but I think if it was just a little bit flatter, let's say maybe even a little bit less of a hook than the PX4 or something like that, I think you'd get a little bit more of a consistent trigger pull on it. Again, this double action when it came out of the box was crazy heavy. It was about 14 pounds. To me, that's completely unacceptable for a double action firearm. And the single action was not much better. So I did put a hammer spring in here, trigger return spring, did a nice job to it. And now the trigger pull is fairly easy. However, when you look at the reset, that's a long reset. And then of course, when you hit that reset, you look at all that travel on that trigger to get back to your single action shot. So even though the single action shot is pretty light, the take up of the gun and double action is a lot smoother now, but still could use some help. And then again, that reset on the gun, which I didn't reset it. Sorry, my bad. The reset on the firearm is very, very long. And again, a lot of over travel once you get to that point. Once you hit to the single action in the wall, it's a very nice, smooth trigger pull on that end. So, I mean, if I was going to grade the trigger out of the box, to me, it's a D, if not an F. With some upgrades, and again, very minor upgrades for very low price, I'd say the trigger right now is pulling at about a B, maybe a B+, but I'd say a B is probably where I would rate it right now. Again, you have your your slide release, slide lock here on both sides, so it is ambi. You also have the ambi mag release here on this side and that side. And again, this is kind of a pet peeve. Some people don't like it because it's a very small lever, and I agree with that. I still think the best lever release I've ever seen on a magazine was the I can't think of the word now. It was the Walther P99 AS. Wonderful, wonderful mag release and a lever. And I'd also have to say the M1 on the Walther PPQ. Those mag releases with the paddle, fantastic. Nice and long. They're kind of a part of the trigger guard, no issues with it. But this seems to be a little bit too small. So it is a little difficult to manipulate. And it seems to be a little bit more of a pain in the ass than I'd like it to be. Stippling, you guys can see here that it is very basic. Vertical lines, which do absolutely zero. You can see that there is a little more texturing on the rear backstrap and also underneath here. And, it does feel pretty good. I'm not going to lie. It's not horrible. It's not great. It's again, I'd say it's pretty, maybe a B, pretty moderate for some other firearms that are out there. Again, inside, I'm not going to take the gun down because you got to, rack it back, pull this thing out, blah, blah, blah. But nonetheless, inside, you're also going to have a polymer buffer that's on the actual guide rod and spring. And that buffer allegedly reduces the felt recoil of the handgun. Again, I can't necessarily tell you if that's true or not, but I would say that the recoil on this gun is pretty good. It's pretty controllable, pretty manageable, no issues with that. I mean, other than that, the P2000 is kind of one of these weird guns because I think 20 years ago, it was definitely something to be excited about. People looked at it and said, oh my gosh, this looks nice. It's a newer version of the USP. No more, stupid safety, big bulky safety on the side, and you have your decocker on the back. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. But again, there are some things that are left to be desired. I mean, even with the slide, you'll see there are some serrations on the back there, but zero on the front because I guess at that point it wasn't that popular. The slide on the top has a couple of little bevels in here. But again, it's a bulky slide, sits pretty high up. So, again, at that point, it was cool. Now in 2022, probably subpar. Size-wise, this is the PX4 Storm Compact Carry. So I'm going to go butt to butt and slide to slide. Whoops. And by the way, none of these guns are loaded, so don't freak out. I'm not going to blow my fingers off. Boy, if I could get this to sit, that'd be great. So that's right there, basically the size difference. So you can see that the grip on the P2000 a little bit longer because of this magazine. You can see that the slides are not necessarily much different in length when they're lined up. PX4 is slightly smaller, but you can also see that the trigger guard is about in the same area. This one obviously squared up versus the rounded one. So, I mean, size-wise, is the P2000 carryable? 100% it is. It absolutely is because it's comparable to a lot of carry pistols. Now, here's the MR920, and again, you can see here that So the MR920 right here, as you guys can see, is about almost the same size. It's almost identical in size to the P2000, even with the trigger guards lined up. So again, it sits a little bit lower in your hand because you can see that the slide height here is much higher off the polymer than this one right here. But I think overall, 20 years ago, this was definitely a cool gun. I think I can understand why people liked it because it was an advancement then. I think fast forward again, as I've said before, and you're going to find a gun that unfortunately I think has not aged very well. Now, does that take away from its reliability and its usability? Absolutely not. It's still a fantastic firearm. But like I said before, if you're going to look for this gun, don't buy it brand new. I'd say go out and get a used one because to me, the premium price tag this is still carrying just doesn't measure up to some of the other firearms that are currently available. So leave some comments down below. Tell me what you think about the P2000. Is it something that you've owned, want to own, or have absolutely no interest in? And do you agree that maybe some of these old HKs that are out there could really, I guess, do with a facelift, something a little bit more modern, something that could really whet the appetites of people who are H&K fans? So leave those comments down below. Appreciate you guys watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Depends on how you feel that day. Nonetheless, I hope you guys have a great night. Stay safe. And as always, freedom is never free.